Have you ever pondered the chilling effects of a narcissist's lack of empathy? This question sets the stage for our exploration today. Narcissism, a term that traces its roots to Greek mythology, is often thrown around in casual conversation. But in psychological terms, it carries a much deeper and specific meaning. Narcissism is characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, an intense focus on oneself, and a deep need for excessive attention and admiration. It's a complex personality disorder that can manifest in various ways, but one trait stands out starkly: a lack of empathy. This deficit in empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, is a fundamental aspect of narcissism. And it's this chilling indifference to the emotional states of others that can cause considerable harm. Now let's delve a bit deeper into the gender-specific aspects of narcissistic empathy deficits. While narcissism can affect anyone, regardless of their gender, it's important to note that the impact can be vastly different for women. Why is that, you might ask? Well, societal expectations and cultural norms often place women in nurturing and empathetic roles, making them more susceptible to the harmful effects of a narcissist's lack of empathy. The disregard for women's experiences, emotions, and perspectives can have profound consequences. It can lead to emotional distress, diminished self-worth, and even long-term psychological trauma. Moreover, when this lack of empathy is combined with narcissistic tendencies, it can result in a toxic cycle of manipulation and emotional abuse. So, what does this mean? It means we need to recognize and understand the nuanced ways in which narcissistic lack of empathy can impact women. It means we need to shine a spotlight on this often overlooked aspect of narcissism to foster empathy and challenge harmful norms. As we delve deeper, we will explore how this chilling lack of empathy specifically impacts women. By understanding the breadth and depth of this issue, we can begin to address it, promote healing, and work towards a more empathetic society. The journey may not be easy, but it's a journey worth taking, because empathy matters, and understanding is the first step towards positive change. How does this cold lack of empathy echo in the lives of women around us? Let's delve into the real-life stories that shed light on the emotional and psychological impact of narcissistic disregard on women. Imagine a woman who is constantly belittled and undermined by a narcissistic partner. Her achievements are downplayed, her feelings dismissed. She begins to question her worth, her capabilities, her very self. The lack of empathy she experiences from her partner isn't just hurtful, it's psychologically damaging. Over time, she may develop symptoms of anxiety or depression, a testament to the long-term effects of such relentless emotional assault. Consider another example of a professional woman. She's competent, confident, and ambitious, but her narcissistic boss constantly belittles her ideas and contributions, leaving her feeling unseen and unheard. The lack of empathy in such a workplace not only stifles her professional growth, but also erodes her self-esteem and self-worth. The impact is not just professional, it's deeply personal. And then, there's the story of a young girl growing up with a narcissistic parent. The lack of empathy from the very person who is supposed to provide unconditional love and support can be incredibly damaging. She grows up feeling unloved, unimportant, and fundamentally flawed. These feelings can follow her into adulthood, affecting her relationships, her self-esteem, and her mental health. These stories, although heart-wrenching, are just the tip of the iceberg. The emotional toll and long-term effects of narcissistic disregard on women are profound and far-reaching. It's not just about hurt feelings or bruised egos. It's about the erosion of self-esteem, the deepening of insecurities, and the development of mental health issues. It's about the silencing of voices, the stifling of potential, and the marginalization of experiences. These impacts are not limited to the women who directly experience them. They ripple out, affecting families, communities, and societies. They contribute to a culture that devalues and dismisses women's experiences, perpetuating harmful patterns of behavior. Yet each story also holds a spark of resilience. Each woman who survives, who speaks out, who seeks help, and who advocates for change is a beacon of hope. Let these stories inspire us to understand, to empathize, and to act. These stories, although heart-wrenching, are just the tip of the iceberg. How does the lack of empathy become even more destructive when it collides with other societal prejudices? This question brings us to the intersection of narcissism with other factors like race, class, and sexuality. Here, the lack of empathy doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It is amplified, becoming a complex web of disregard that is even more difficult to navigate. To understand this, let's consider narcissism as a single thread. Now, when this thread intertwines with the threads of racial prejudice, economic disparity, and heteronormativity, what we have is not just a single strand of problem, but a knotted rope of oppression. For instance, a woman of color might not only face the narcissistic disregard for her experiences, but also the societal prejudices against her race. A low-income woman might struggle with both the lack of empathy towards her circumstances and the classist attitudes that dismiss her struggles. A queer woman might deal with the narcissistic dismissal of her feelings on top of the societal prejudice against her sexuality. These intersections intensify the narcissistic lack of empathy, creating a compounded effect on marginalized women. They don't just have to deal with one form of disregard. They have to wrestle with a multitude, each amplifying the other. It's like being caught in a storm, where the rain, wind, and cold all join forces to make the weather unbearable. Each element on its own is challenging, but when combined, they create a tempest that is exponentially more destructive. This compounded effect can lead to a deep-seated feeling of isolation, a sense of being misunderstood, and a struggle to find validation. It can result in chronic stress, emotional exhaustion, and even trauma. It's not just about dealing with a person who lacks empathy. It's about fighting against a system that consistently devalues their experiences. This is the grim reality of intersectionality in the context of narcissism and empathy deficits. It's a reality that many women grapple with every day, often in silence and solitude. Understanding this is crucial to truly appreciate the magnitude of the issue at hand. The intersectionality of these factors paints a grimmer picture of the narcissistic lack of empathy. It's a picture that calls for more understanding, more compassion, and more empathy. Because when we begin to see the full picture, we can start to unravel the knots and create a society where every woman's experience is valued and respected. How does the lack of empathy breed a toxic environment of gaslighting and emotional manipulation? Let's delve into this. At its core, gaslighting is a form of emotional manipulation where one person tries to make another question their own perception, memory, or sanity, often to deflect blame or maintain control. Now imagine a person who lacks empathy, a fundamental quality to understand and share the feelings of others. This lack of empathy is a key characteristic of narcissism, and it forms the breeding ground for gaslighting. Why does this happen? Narcissists are often consumed with preserving their own image and status, and they will go to great lengths to protect it. This can include distorting reality and manipulating the emotions of those around them. In essence, through gaslighting, the narcissist invalidates the experiences and feelings of others, often leaving them feeling confused, anxious, and doubting their own intuition. So how does this specifically impact women? Well, in relationships where the narcissist is male, women can become targets of this manipulation due to societal norms that have traditionally placed men in positions of power and control. This dynamic can make it easier for the narcissist to gaslight their partner, leading to a cycle of emotional abuse. But how do we recognize these tactics? Gaslighting can come in many forms. It could be in the guise of a casual yet dismissive comment about your feelings, or an outright denial of an event you clearly remember. The key is to trust your own instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Addressing these tactics can be challenging. It involves setting boundaries, seeking support, and sometimes distancing ourselves from the source of manipulation. Remember, it's essential to prioritize your mental and emotional health. In sum, a lack of empathy in narcissistic individuals can lead to harmful practices like gaslighting and emotional manipulation. These tactics can be particularly damaging to women, who are often on the receiving end of such behavior. By understanding and recognizing these patterns, we can begin to break free from them. Recognizing these patterns is the first step towards breaking free from them. How does our society unknowingly perpetuate this lack of empathy? It's a question that demands our attention. Often, societal expectations and cultural norms play a subtle yet significant role in perpetuating a lack of empathy for women's experiences. These social constructs can unconsciously validate the narcissistic disregard for women's narratives, further entrenching the empathy deficit. For instance, the societal expectation for women to be nurturing and selfless can inadvertently enable narcissistic individuals to exploit this altruism without reciprocation. Similarly, cultural norms that champion stoicism can discourage empathetic responses, subtly endorsing a disregard for emotional experiences. But we're not doomed to these patterns. There are potential avenues for cultural change. By promoting narratives that celebrate emotional intelligence and empathy, we can begin to shift these ingrained societal expectations. Increased representation of diverse women's experiences can also challenge these norms and build understanding. As a society, we must challenge these norms to foster a culture of empathy and understanding. What can we do to challenge the narcissistic lack of empathy and its impact on women? Quite a bit, as it turns out. We've journeyed through the labyrinth of narcissism, tracing its cold, unempathetic fingers through women's experiences. We've seen how it distorts perceptions, dismisses narratives, and deepens divides. In the face of such disregard, it's crucial we cultivate empathy, understanding, and respect for diverse experiences. We've also examined how intersectionality exacerbates the lack of empathy, creating a harsh reality for marginalized women. We've delved into the dark corners of gaslighting and emotional manipulation, illuminating the need for awareness and resilience. We've reflected on the role cultural norms and societal expectations play in perpetuating this empathy deficit. It's time we stand together, challenge these norms, and foster a culture of empathy. Encourage open dialogue, support empathy-building initiatives, and remember, your voice matters. Together, we can foster empathy, challenge cultural norms, and stand against the disregard for women's experiences. Join the conversation to promote understanding and positive change. #empathy matters, #narcissism awareness, #women empowerment.